The crystalline spires of Research Station Infernus 9 gleamed against the crimson sky, their heat-dispersing surfaces refracting the endless sea of lava that stretched to the horizon. Chief Researcher Zixtal adjusted her cooling arrays for the third time that morning, all 6 of her sensor stalks twitching with anxiety. The incoming transport would arrive any minute now, carrying what her superiors had assured her was the solution to their heat-resistant materials crisis. A human. The very thought made her protective membranes flutter. Humans. Deathworlders. The stories about their resilience seemed more like myths than scientific fact. Yet here she was, preparing to welcome one into the most advanced volcanic research facility in the Galactic Science Coalition. Transport approaching on Vector 7, announced Koore, the station's eye. Atmospheric temperature at landing pad, 873 Kelvin. Beside Zixtal, senior geologist, Rethvi's crystalline form shifted through shades of nervous violet. Chief, are we certain about this? The environmental systems weren't designed for a species that considers magma a minor inconvenience. Zixtal finished dryly. No, they weren't. That's precisely why we need their expertise. The transport ship descended through the perpetual ash clouds, its shields glowing as they dispersed the incredible heat. It was smaller than expected, barely large enough for a single passenger. As it settled onto the reinforced landing pad, Zixtal noticed something odd about its construction. The hull wasn't covered in the standard cooling arrays. Instead, it seemed to be made of some dark, matte material that simply absorbed the heat. The airlock cycled and outstepped the human. Zixtal's primary heart nearly stopped. The being wore what appeared to be nothing more than a thin fabric suit, dark blue with silver trim. No cooling units, no protective fields, not even basic heat shielding. The human's exposed skin, a warm brown color, gleamed with moisture in the volcanic heat. Dr. Jasmine Patel, the human, called out cheerfully, walking across the landing pad as if she weren't standing in temperatures that could vaporize most species' blood. Earth Volcanic Studies Division. Thanks for having me. Rethvi's crystalline form had gone completely transparent with shock. Through the observation window, they watched Dr. Patel pause to examine a nearby lava flow, pulling out what looked like primitive scanning equipment. Fascinating composition, she muttered, kneeling down to get a closer look. The silicon content must be off the charts. Zixtal finally found her voice. Dr. Patel, please, you must come inside immediately. The environmental hazards. Oh, don't worry about me, Jasmine replied, standing up and brushing ash from her knees. This is nothing compared to the Venusian research stations. Now those require serious heat protection. She walked to the airlock, carrying a small bag of what looked like decidedly non-heat resistant equipment. Once inside the station proper, Jasmine looked around with obvious interest at the elaborate cooling systems and reinforced walls. Impressive setup you've got here. Though you might be overcooling a bit, it's practically frigid. Zixtal checked the environmental readout. The station was maintaining its standard temperature of 350 Kelvin, hot enough that most species required cooling suits just to visit. Dr. Patel, she began carefully, all 6 sensor stalks focused on the human. Perhaps we should discuss safety protocols before. Absolutely. Jasmine pulled out a datapad. I've been reviewing your current procedures. They're very thorough, but I think we can streamline them quite a bit. For instance, your lava sampling method. Using drones at a 50-meter distance, we can get much better data if we collect samples directly. Rethvi finally found his voice. Directly. But the temperature readings at the collection sites regularly exceed 1200 Kelvin. Well, yeah, Jasmine grinned, reaching into her bag and pulling out what looked like a simple metal rod. That's why I brought my lucky sampling pole. Titanium tungsten alloy with a ceramic core. Old school, but reliable. Sometimes the simplest tools are the best, you know. Zixtal watched in fascination as moisture continued to bead on the human skin, occasionally dripping off. Dr. Patel, are you leaking? Oh, you mean the sweat. Jasmine laughed. Yeah, that's just how humans regulate temperature. Evaporative cooling. Really efficient once you get used to it. Speaking of which, mind if I take off my outer layer? It's still a bit warm in here. Before anyone could respond, she unzipped the blue suit, revealing even lighter clothing underneath. Rethvi's crystalline form cycled through several shades of distress. Now then, Jasmine said, pulling up complex geological diagrams on her datapad. Let's talk about that new magma chamber you discovered in Sector 7. The pressure reading suggests some fascinating possibilities for studying deep crust formation. I'm thinking we could set up a direct observation post. Dr. Patel, Zixtal interrupted, trying to maintain her composure. Your species evolved on a world with an average temperature of 287 Kelvin. How is it possible that you can function in these conditions? Jasmine's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. Oh, that's a fascinating story. You see, humans evolved as persistence hunters on the savannas of Africa. We developed this amazing ability to regulate our temperature through sweating, which meant we could literally chase prey until they collapsed from heat exhaustion. Most earth mammals can't sweat like we do. They have to pant to cool down. Did you know we can actually outrun horses over long distances in hot weather? Though personally, I prefer studying volcanoes to chasing zebras. She continued chattering excitedly about human evolutionary history, while Zixtal and Rethvi exchanged worried looks. They had expected their human consultant to bring advanced technology, elaborate protective gear, or at least a basic understanding of proper safety protocols. Instead, they got an enthusiastic scientist who treated temperatures that could melt metal as a minor inconvenience. Chief, Core interrupted. Sensors indicate increased activity in the northwestern magma chamber. Temperature spike of 1500 Kelvin detected. Ooh, perfect timing. Jasmine exclaimed, already heading toward the equipment room. I've been wanting to test these new proximity sensors. Shall we go take a look? Zixtal watched the human practically bounce with excitement at the prospect of approaching temperatures that could vaporize most known forms of life. She had a sinking feeling that all the safety protocols in the galaxy wouldn't be enough to prepare them for what was coming. Core, she said quietly, begin recording all observations of human thermal tolerance. I suspect we're about to rewrite several chapters of xenobiology. Behind her, Jasmine was already pulling out more alarmingly simple-looking equipment, talking animatedly about something called Hawaiian Shirt Friday and how they simply had to institute it at the station. Rethvi had gone completely transparent again. It was going to be an interesting research cycle. The pre-expedition briefing was not going well. Zixtal watched with mounting anxiety as Dr. Patel cheerfully dismantled centuries of established safety protocols. So these lava tubes you've mapped, Jasmine said, manipulating the holographic display with surprising dexterity for a species with only 5 fingers. They extend at least 20 kilometers beneath the surface, right? Theoretically, Rethvi hummed, his crystalline form still showing traces of yesterday's panic. The drone mapping is incomplete due to temperature constraints and... Perfect. Jasmine expanded the image, highlighting a particular tunnel. Look at these formations. The mineral composition suggests potential access to deeper magma chambers. We could gather data that's never been collected before. Third researcher Pelthan, their atmospheric specialist, rippled her gas exchange membranes nervously. But the drones can't survive those temperatures. Even our most advanced models melt after brief exposure. Who said anything about drones? Jasmine grinned, pulling up schematics for what looked alarmingly like personal protective equipment. I brought spelunking gear. The room fell silent except for the constant hum of the cooling systems. Zixtal felt all 6 of her sensor stalks go rigid. Dr. Patel, are you suggesting we go in ourselves? Well, I go in. You all can monitor from a safe distance. She started unpacking what looked like primitive climbing equipment. The suit's good for about 4 hours at 1500 Kelvin, though I prefer to keep it under 1200 for comfort. Comfort, Pelthen whispered faintly. Chief. Core interrupted. Station sensors detect increased tectonic activity in Sector 9. Magma chamber pressure rising. Jasmine's eyes lit up. Even better. Active conditions will give us much more dynamic data. When can we start? 2 hours later, Zixtal found herself at the entrance to the largest lava tube, watching in horrified fascination as Jasmine performed final checks on her equipment. The human had exchanged her casual wear for what she called a standard thermal suit, though it looked absurdly inadequate compared to the station's normal protective gear. Communication check. Jasmine's voice came through clearly despite the roaring of nearby lava flows. Biomonitors online. Temperature sensors active. And she pulled out a small container. Water supply ready. Water. Rethvi asked from the safety of the observation post. At these temperatures, wouldn't it instantly vaporize? That's kind of the point, Jasmine explained, taking a long drink. Gotta stay hydrated for optimal sweating. Human Temperature Regulation 101. Before anyone could voice further objections, she approached the tube entrance. The air shimmered with heat distortion, and even from a distance, their instruments registered temperatures that should have made any approach impossible. Beginning descent, Jasmine reported professionally, though Zixtal could hear barely contained excitement in her voice. Initial temperature reading 1100 Kelvin. Surface composition appears to be primarily basaltic with interesting crystalline inclusions. Oh, this is gorgeous. The research team watched their monitors in stunned silence as Jasmine made her way deeper into the tube. Her vital signs remained remarkably stable despite conditions that would have killed most species instantly. Dr. Patel, Zixtal manage. Your core temperature. Yeah, it's up about a degree. Nothing to worry about. Did you know humans regularly raise their core temperature by several degrees just for fun? We call it exercise. She paused to collect samples, handling molten rock with casual ease. Though this is admittedly a bit warmer than my usual morning jog. Suddenly, the ground trembled. Warning indicators flashed across their screens. Seismic activity detected, Core announced. Magma flow rate increasing by 47%. Dr. Patel, you must return immediately. Zixtal's sensor stalks writhed with anxiety. Wait. Jasmine's voice was filled with scientific excitement rather than fear. These vibrations, they're not random. The magma flow is following a pattern. Core, can you correlate this with the previous week's data? Despite the crisis, Zixtal found herself drawn into the human scientific curiosity. They quickly analyzed the patterns, discovering that what they had thought were dangerous irregular eruptions were actually part of a precise geological cycle. The entire system pulses like a heart, Jasmine explained, still making observations despite the increasing danger. We've been seeing it backward, trying to avoid the peak activity times. But those are exactly when we should be gathering data. A massive tremor shook the station. Through their monitors, they watched in horror as part of the tube ceiling collapsed behind Jasmine. Dr. Patel. Pelthen's gas membranes fluttered in distress. Your exit is blocked. Oh, don't worry about that. They could hear her rummaging through equipment. I brought backup gear. Though this might be a good opportunity to test that alternative route I spotted. The one that leads deeper into the magma chamber. Absolutely not. Zixtal tried to make her voice as authoritative as possible. The temperatures at that depth are within acceptable parameters for my equipment. Jasmine finished cheerfully. Plus, think of the data we could collect. No one's ever made direct observations at this depth before. Before they could protest further, she was already moving deeper into the tunnel system. Her vital signs continued to read as normal, even as their instruments showed external temperatures approaching 1400 Kelvin. Oh wow, Jasmine's voice was filled with wonder. You have to see this. Activating video feed. The screens lit up with images that made even Rethvi's crystalline form vibrate with scientific excitement. Massive chambers filled with swirling patterns of magma, mineral formations that defied known physics, and evidence of chemical processes they had only theorized about. "This is revolutionary," Rethve whispered. "The implications for our understanding of planetary formation." "I know, right?" Jasmine sounded like she was having the time of her life. "And look at these crystal structures. They're growing in real time. The heat and pressure conditions here are perfect for—" "Oh, hold on." There was a pause. "My suit's giving me a temperature warning. Better wrap this up." Temperature warning. Zixtal checked the readings and felt all three of her hearts skip. "Dr. Patel, you're in an environment hot enough to melt titanium." "Yeah, getting a bit toasty," Jasmine admitted. "Don't worry, I know a shortcut back. Though, maybe we should install some cooling units down here for future expeditions. Could make a nice research outpost." The entire research team watched in continued disbelief as their human colleague casually made her way back through conditions that their most advanced drones couldn't survive, all while discussing plans for turning one of the most hostile environments imaginable into a permanent workspace. When Jasmine finally emerged, covered in volcanic ash and grinning from ear to ear, Zixtal realized their understanding of both human capabilities and planetary science would never be the same. "So," Jasmine said, already pulling out her data pad to review the readings, "same time tomorrow." Those deeper chambers looked really promising. Rethvi quietly collapsed into his emergency cooling chamber. It was going to be a very long research mission. The warning sirens pierced through the constant rumble of Infernus 9's volcanic activity. Zixtal burst into the control room, all 6 sensor stalks rigid with alarm. "Status report," she demanded, rushing to the main console where Pelthan was frantically analyzing data streams. Massive pressure buildup in the main caldera. Pelthan's gas membranes pulsed with anxiety. "Core, it predicts a catastrophic eruption within 6 hours. The magma chamber. It's unlike anything we've recorded." "Where's Dr. Patel?" Zixtal asked, dreading the answer. "Still in lava tube complex B." Rethvi's crystalline form shimmered with worry. She insisted on checking her theory about the crystal formations, said something about pressure-induced metamorphosis being totally worth the risk. The main screen showed a thermal map of the surrounding region. The usual reds and oranges had given way to brilliant whites, indicating temperatures that exceeded their sensors' maximum range. "Dr. Patel," Zixtal called through the communication system, "you must evacuate immediately. The entire region is becoming unstable." "I'm seeing that." Jasmine's voice came back, surprisingly calm. "These pressure readings are fascinating. The crystalline structures are actually responding to the increased stress, creating entirely new mineral formations." "Hold on, let me get a better look." This is not the time for scientific observation. Zixtal's sensor stalks writhed in frustration. "The evacuation protocols." "Wait," Jasmine interrupted. "These formations, they're not just responding to the pressure. They're channeling it. Core, can you analyze these structural patterns I'm sending?" The AI processed the data quickly. Analysis indicates a natural pressure relief system within the crystal matrices. However, current pressure exceeds the system's capacity by approximately 300%. "But what if we could enhance it?" Jasmine's voice held that dangerous tone of excitement that Zixtal had learned to fear. "The crystals are acting like pressure release valves. If we could replicate this pattern." Another tremor shook the station, strong enough to make Rethvi's crystalline form vibrate in resonance. "Chief," Core announced, "structural integrity at 82% and declining. Recommended evacuation time, 4 hours, 37 minutes. "That's enough time," Jasmine said confidently. "I need every piece of heat-resistant material you've got, especially those experimental alloys we've been working on, and get me access to the station's main cooling system controls." "Dr. Patel," Zixtal tried to keep her voice steady, "whatever you're planning." "We can save the station," Jasmine insisted. "These crystal formations aren't just beautiful. They're showing us how this planet manages its own geological pressures. We just need to help it along a bit. What followed was the most intense 3 hours of Zixtel's scientific career. Under Jasmine's direction, they repurposed the station's cooling systems, using them to forge their experimental materials into structures that mimicked the natural crystal formations. The human moved through lethal temperatures as if they were merely uncomfortable, directing the placement of their makeshift pressure relief system. The trick, Jasmine explained while casually adjusting equipment in temperatures that could melt steel, is to work with the planet's natural systems, not against them. Earth's volcanoes taught us that fighting the pressure just makes things worse. Speaking of pressure, Pelthen announced nervously, magma chamber readings are still rising. We have less than an hour before. The ground heaved violently. Warning lights flashed across every console. Structural integrity at 64%, Core reported. Evacuation protocols now mandatory. Almost there, Jasmine muttered, making final adjustments. The crystal matrix is almost aligned. Just need to. There. A deep rumble resonated through the station. On their monitors, they watched as the deadly pressure began to redistribute, flowing through their artificial channels and the natural crystal formations in a complex dance of heat and force. It's working. Rethvi's crystalline form glowed with amazement. The pressure is stabilizing. Of course it is, Jasmine said, finally making her way back to the control room. Her suit was scored with heat damage, and her exposed skin glistened with that fascinating human cooling mechanism. The planet knows what it's doing. We just had to learn its language. As the immediate crisis passed, Zixtel found herself staring at their thermal readings in disbelief. Dr. Patel, according to these instruments, you just spent 3 hours working in temperatures exceeding 1600 Kelvin. Really? Jasmine checked her own readings. Ha! No wonder I'm thirsty. Anyone want to join me for a coffee? I brought some heat-resistant beans from Earth's volcanic regions. They make the best brew. You want to consume heated liquid? Pelthen's gas membranes rippled with confusion. After everything that just happened? Of course, nothing better after a good day's work. Though I should probably shower first. She looked down at her ash-covered suit. Interesting thing about volcanic ash. It's actually great for exfoliation. Reminds me of this spa treatment I tried once near Mount Fuji. Zixtel watched as their human colleague casually discussed beauty treatments involving volcanic materials, while the station's cooling systems struggled to compensate for the residual heat she was giving off. The most remarkable thing wasn't that Jasmine had just saved their station and years of research. It was that she seemed to consider it all perfectly normal. Oh, and before I forget, Jasmine added, pulling out her ever-present datapad, those new crystal formations we discovered. I think they might be the key to revolutionizing our heat-resistant materials. If we can replicate their molecular structure, well, let's just say the Galactic Science Coalition is going to be very interested in our next report. As if to emphasize her point, another tremor shook the station, gentler now following the paths they had created. See, Jasmine grinned. The planet's just saying hello. Now about that coffee. Rethvi quietly excused himself to his cooling chamber, muttering something about needing to recalibrate his stress tolerances. Zixtel couldn't blame him. Sometimes she wondered if the most remarkable discovery on Infernus 9 wasn't the volcanic phenomena they were studying, but rather the casual resilience of their human researcher. Core, she said quietly, update xenobiology files. Humans don't just survive extreme environments. They make themselves at home in them. And they make coffee, Pelthen added weakly, watching Jasmine happily set up her heat-resistant brewing equipment. The research station's laboratory had undergone a dramatic transformation in the weeks following the Caldera crisis. Where once sterile workstations and standard equipment stood, now a peculiar hybrid of alien technology and what Jasmine called old-school Earth ingenuity filled the space. The breakthrough, Jasmine explained, holding up a crystalline structure that glowed with inert heat, wasn't in trying to block the heat. It was in learning to work with it. She stood before a gathering of the station's scientific team, who had finally stopped flinching every time she handled materials hot enough to melt conventional sensors. Like human perspiration, Zixtal observed, her sensor stalks extending with interest. Your bodies don't fight the heat. They adapt to it. Exactly. Jasmine beamed. We've been approaching heat resistance all wrong. These new materials don't just withstand heat. They channel it, redirect it, even use it. Just like the planet's natural systems. Rethve, who had gradually learned to maintain his crystalline form stability around their human colleagues' more extreme experiments, manipulated the holographic display to show their latest test results. The molecular structure is unlike anything in our database. It's as if the material is alive. Not alive exactly, Jasmine corrected, casually adjusting a furnace that blazed at 1800 Kelvin. But dynamic, responsive, like the way human skin adjusts to different temperatures, or how the volcanic crystals we found adapt to pressure changes. Pelthin drifted closer, her gas membranes rippling with scientific curiosity. The implications for space exploration alone. Ships could dive deeper into stellar coronas. Colonies could be established on worlds we thought uninhabitable. And that's just the beginning, Jasmine said, pulling up more data. Watch this. She placed the crystal structure directly into the furnace's core. The temperature readout climbed rapidly. Dr. Patel. Zixtal's sensor stalks whipped back instinctively. That temperature exceeds. Just wait. Jasmine held up a hand. Eyes fixed on the readouts. The crystal began to pulse with an inner light, its structure shifting, adapting. As the temperature continued to rise, something remarkable happened. The heat began to flow through the material in controlled patterns, creating what looked like circulatory channels. It's beautiful, Rethwe whispered, his own crystalline form resonating slightly with the display. It's using principles similar to my species' natural heat distribution systems, but at temperatures we could never survive. Borrowed from the best, Jasmine grinned. Your crystalline biology, Pelthin's gas exchange principles, Zixtal's sensor adaptation capabilities. We combined them all with what we learned from the planet's own systems, and a little human persistence thrown in for good measure. Another scientist rushed into the lab, their movement appendages waving excitedly. Chief, the preliminary results from the deep magma probes. They're revolutionary. The new sensors are functioning at depths we thought impossible. Zixtal felt all three of her hearts swell with pride. In just a few months, their research station had produced more groundbreaking discoveries than in the previous decade. And it all started with learning to see extreme environments through human eyes. There is one thing I don't understand, Pelthin said, examining the latest data. Dr. Patel, your species evolved on a temperate world. By all logic, you should be the least suited to this research. Yet you seem almost comfortable in these conditions. Jasmine laughed, wiping sweat from her brow. That remarkable human cooling system still fascinated them all. Humans have a saying, necessity is the mother of invention. We didn't evolve to handle extreme heat like your species did, so we had to learn to adapt. Maybe that's why we're good at it, because we had to work for it. Like your persistence hunting, Zixtal remembered. You didn't have natural weapons or speed, so you developed endurance instead. Exactly. We're not the strongest, fastest, or most naturally suited to any environment, but we're really, really good at figuring out how to thrive anyway. She pulled the crystal structure from the furnace, examining it with bare hands in a way that still made her colleagues nervous. That's what this project is really about, combining natural adaptation with deliberate innovation. The crystal pulsed with inner light, its structure now permanently altered by the extreme heat, yet stronger for it. Zixtal couldn't help but see it as a metaphor for their entire collaboration. Core, she called out. Begin new research log. Title: The Thermal Bridge. Combining biological adaptation and technological innovation in extreme environment studies. Suggested addition to title. Core responded. Subtitle: A human perspective on heat resistance. Perfect, Jasmine said, already setting up another experiment. Though we might want to add something about how this could revolutionize galactic ice cream production. These heat management principles work both ways, you know. Ice, cream. Rethvi's form shifted in confusion. Oh, right. I keep forgetting you haven't tried it yet. Don't worry. Once we finish this round of tests, I'll show you how humans celebrate scientific breakthroughs. Ever heard of a Sunday party? As their human colleague launched into an enthusiastic explanation of frozen dairy products, Zixtol made a private note in her personal log. Perhaps the most valuable discovery is not the technology we're developing, but the reminder that the most extraordinary solutions come from embracing our differences rather than fearing them. The crystal structure continued to pulse gently in its containment field, a testament to what was possible when human determination met alien wisdom. And somewhere in the distance, in Furnace 9's volcanoes rumbled their approval.